Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing? We do have a quick, exciting announcement up top. Biopic, a podcast story, is speaking at Intelligent Speech Online. This year's theme is Companions and Rivals. We will be talking about Truman Capote's friendships and doppelgangers in Capote and Infamous, the two Truman Capote writes in Cold Blood movies that came out within a year of each other in 2005 and 2006. Intelligent Speech is a veritable three-ring circus of content composed of 4 virtual rooms running simultaneous 40-minute sessions. These sessions include esteemed keynotes, fascinating and thoughtful creator presentations, or lively roundtable discussions, followed by a Q&A with the audience. These Q&As, together with space and time for separate chats, create a unique experience in which members of the community can engage directly with the creators they follow. The online conference is taking place on February 28, 2026, and your ticket not only includes live attendance, but also access to recordings of all the sessions after the event to watch at your leisure, and tickets are available now at intelligentspeechonline.com.
Enter Biopic, that's BIOPIC, at the checkout for 10% off because we sent you. And if you ask very, very nicely during our Q&A session, I may tell you the story of the time I chatted up Harper Lee in the emergency room line at New York Presbyterian.
It happened.
It sure did. Sarah, what movie are we doing this week?
This week we will be talking about Selma, directed by the one and only Ava DuVernay. And Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
Trigger warning. This movie contains depictions of and/or references to racism, adultery, politics, violence, Jim Crow, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, assholes, Oprah Winfrey, jail, and stacked casting.
Yeah. And Rena, can you please give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned. And before I get on to sources, Sarah, you want to introduce our guest properly?
I would be happy to. We are so thrilled to welcome back Brandon Wilson, filmmaker, film writer, teacher, and lecturer. Born and raised in Los Angeles, he took a BA in African American Studies and an MFA from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. He also teaches at Glendale Community College and Whatcom Community College. He has also taught at Columbia College Hollywood, Los Angeles Valley College, NYU's Los Angeles, and he is also a filmmaker, and we had him here for Malcolm X, and we're so happy to have him back for Selma. Welcome back. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming back on the show.
Hello, and thank you both for having me. After Malcolm X, hey, Selma's the next. That feels like a good one to do. Right after. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to talking about the film.
Thank you.
Same.
Yeah. So sources used in this episode include the book King Life by Jonathan Aig. Let's see. Let me get this right. John Lewis, A Life by David Greenberg, and Robert Caro's multi-volume bio on LBJ. And also, I don't know if it'll be relevant, but an article from Time magazine about MLK being a Trekkie.
Excellent. I did a lot of reading on the internet, and I can't tell you all the things, and I should have kept track, but that's not my thing.
Okay. So, Brandon, can you please give those of our listeners who have spent their entire life living under a rock in Mississippi a 360-second summary on the life of Martin Luther King Jr.?
Okay. Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael King, and afterwards his father changed both of their names. He called to Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr. respectively. Born in Atlanta, a bit of a, child prodigy, son of a preacher, and, unusually academically gifted, goes to Morehouse, falls in love with Coretta Scott, who's a little bit older, actually, which feels unusual for the time, ends up taking a doctorate. I will confess that as I am in the middle of teaching, not just high school classes, but 2 sets of college courses, did not prepare as much as I usually do, like I did for the X. This is all just off the top of my head. Fortunately, this is a film that's in my wheelhouse. So, is drafted essentially to be the front man for a movement, a bus boycott movement in Alabama by, a bunch of old ladies. Joanne Robinson's one, whose name we know, who otherwise will pass into history unrecognized, but he is recognized. It's understood that he's a very charismatic speaker and photogenic, and he is launched as a leader in this burgeoning civil rights movement. He picks up a lot of allies and associates and mentors. Bayard Rustin, of course, is probably the one that's gotten the most attention lately, who Rustin is purported to be the man that taught King about nonviolence. Rustin always said that King was a gun owner when he met him, and like many men in the South, King took this nonviolence approach and began to very judiciously build his movement. His organization, with him at the top, was very, as you would imagine, male-driven, clergy-driven, and that sort of led to some people leaving his group to do their own thing, like Ella Baker, and then you have eventually the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, SNCC, coming into being, sort of representing the younger generation. King has a lot of good people around him, and he really has a knack for meeting the moment. He sort of builds up a certain amount of social capital as a leader. I'm going to stop right there because that kind of takes us to where Selma brings us to King, with him accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, arguably at the height of his popularity and influence.
And Sarah and Brandon, can you please tell our listeners a little bit about the 2014 film Selma?
Sure. I can kick off here. Selma came out in 2014. It is Ava DuVernay's 3rd feature film. I bow down. She's just so good at so many things. And she started her career as a journalist, and then she became a publicist. So she is one of mine, or I really more accurately am one of hers. She went to film school, and she's a polymath and a wonderful, and consistently in all of those jobs, you are a storyteller. And she is an outstanding storyteller. She achieved such a level of storytelling competence that in 2016, 2 writers from The Guardian, Nadia and Leila Latif, introduced the notion of the DuVernay test, which was then co-opted by Manohla Dargis. The question that it asks is whether Black and other minority characters have fully realized lives or serve as scenery in white stories. So it is a takeoff of the Bechdel test. This movie, it was a modest success. There's debate about this, but I see numbers of 20 million budget and then it made 53 million. That means it was successful. But when all of these other budgets come into play, like sometimes they're able to say it wasn't a hit, but that's a success. A couple of things. Originally, this script sat on the blacklist. It was on the blacklist in 2007. Credited to this individual, Paul Webb. And initially the screenplay apparently centered much more around the politics of MLK and LBJ and how they allied. And obviously the final film made the movie about these events through the perspective of MLK, which is kind of unique for the number of movies there are out there about this era that are told through the eyes of white people.
Isn't there already a movie that we did for Politics Month 2024 about the LBJ MLK interaction called All the Way, starring Bryan Cranston and Anthony Mackie?
There is, however, this did come first.
Okay.
Originally, Lee Daniels was going to direct this. It had a very distracting cast attached to it. Hugh Jackman as Sheriff Jim Clark.
No.
Liam Neeson as Lyndon B. Johnson.
No.
Robert De Niro as George Wallace.
No.
Cedric the Entertainer as Ralph Abernathy, which would have been okay. Lenny Kravitz as Andrew Young, which Lenny Kravitz is a little too beautiful for this world. Same as Coleman Domingo, though, too. I think the movie could have accommodated it, and Lenny Kravitz can be a very, very good actor. And David Oyelowo was attached as MLK, and when Ava DuVernay took over the picture, he's the only one who stayed. There's a little bit of, like, ultimately who wrote it drama around this movie. So Paul Webb is credited in the film. However, DuVernay did a complete overhaul of the screenplay and probably did, it sounds like, most of the work, including having to rewrite all of MLK's speeches because his speeches are already licensed out to, I think, Paramount owns them, or like owns their film rights to the speeches. So she had to rewrite the speeches, which she did a pretty darn good job at because I didn't necessarily pick up on that until I read that. She really regretted giving away her film credit on the writing because she did so much work on this. And you may ask, who is Paul Webb? Great question. I don't know. He apparently wrote a draft of Lincoln for Spielberg, according to IMDb, but as we know from our Lincoln episode, I think you and I are the only two people who didn't get the opportunity to take a pass on that screenplay at some point. And he also wrote 3 episodes of the miniseries Madiba about Nelson Mandela. But when I was looking into him, he is as sus as Alberto Minuetta, the supposed 5th golden ticket winner in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I can't figure out who the hell this guy is. So that's just a little bit of background and some interesting facts I was able to find out about the movie.
That covers it pretty well. So Ava and I'm using her first name because I've met her and we have a bit of a rapport. Ava and I have an interesting history. We were at UCLA at the same time, though we did not know each other. And you want to know something really amazing? There was in Westwood a riot that happened when I believe New Jack City opened because they oversold tickets. And Westwood at the time, in the early 90s, was a very popular destination for the youth, and particularly with the black youth, myself included. That's where we went to see movies. So you had this college town for UCLA, but it was also just a place where everybody went. And they oversold the New Jack City tickets. People were upset. Windows were smashed, and it turned into a whole situation. I Googled an LA Times article about it, and who was interviewed but 19-year-old Ava DuVernay, who had very pointed words for LAPD and how they had handled the situation, which, yeah, I posted it on Twitter and I tagged her and she kind of made a joke like, what, me saying something, saying something pointed about LAPD? But I didn't know her then. We got chummy on Twitter when she was finishing I Will Follow. And I met her and we were Twitter friends and all that stuff. And then Middle of Nowhere happened. And then that was kind of the game changer. Selma was her first studio film, her first film with the full muscle of Harpo Productions behind her. It was enormously exciting to see the film come out and to see someone that I have a certain personal investment in as someone who just like, I don't know super well, but it just seems like we were destined to sort of have our paths cross. The film is a very interesting lift because, MLK has not gotten a lot of big screen coverage. I was just thinking about the TV miniseries that Abby Mann, who's a screenwriter, that was his only directing credit, was directing all the episodes of this TV miniseries, which I remember as a kid, starring Paul Winfield as MLK. It's on YouTube, of course, but I didn't get a chance to watch it. I remember when the movie came out, just thinking that it almost felt like the film was almost like reclaiming MLK, like we're going to tell his story and you think you've seen it before, but there's a lot more to him than possibly meets the eye. The whole sainted issue, the film I think deals with that, and very interesting for someone that I know to be Gen X and African-American Gen X at that, and what that kind of means for those of us who kind of came of age with hip hop and politically and so forth. So yeah, the film was it's hard to gauge. It seemed like a success at the time, but perhaps the numbers, it's hard to interpret all that. Talk some more about some of the issues with it. And it was nominated for, of course, 2 Academy Awards, Best Picture and Best Song. And as typical for African-American films, it won Best Song.
I'm prepared when we get to awards talk. I started thinking about like how this is showing him as a full person and how rare that is. And I was thinking about when we did our Gandhi episode, one of the things we found when Richard Attenborough started shooting that was there were reporters in India who were suggesting to him very seriously that Gandhi just be portrayed as like a blast of white light. Mm-hmm. I feel like I feel like people have done that to MLK, but also done it in a really sinister way, where every year on his birthday, there's a bunch of people who absolutely do not live by the tenets that he was aiming for and do not rule by those tenets and do not share the same goals as he did, who co-opt his language in order to suit their own needs.
Sarah, are you talking about all of those conservatives who use 2 sentences of his completely out of context to warrant perpetuating the status quo?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something more inspiring about seeing him as a human than seeing him as someone who was like impervious to the pain and the conflict of what he was doing. And the responsibility, which I think you see weigh on him throughout this movie, is what he is responsible for, and the risk that he's taking on every single day that is being assumed not only by him but by the people who he has asked to follow him. And this movie's a real gift. It's also like a really unsettling one. The magic at the core of all of this is how human he is and how he's being brave and doing it anyway, even though this had to be terrifying.
I was going to say earlier, and I maybe got lost from the point, but let's also keep in mind that the film was released in 2014, which is very different from 2026. So this is an Obama era film. And it's one thing to look at this film now, but to look at it during sort of the middle of the second Obama term, there was a certain amount of let's take a look back to see how we got here at the time. The film is really effective at reclaiming King to some degree. I think DuVernay is sort of saying that King has often felt like he belongs to everyone, and this is our way of sort of reframing him as a very African-American figure and someone who comes out of the Black South, just to show him as a human. I mean, I don't think there's any possibility that the script before she got it started with Coretta Scott King helping him with his ascot. Like, I just don't think there's any way that wasn't Ava's doing, or just sort of understanding that the relationship between Martin and Coretta had to be the heart of the film and the core of the film, including addressing the elephant in the room with King, which is his infidelities, which frankly, my jaw dropped in the theater when I realized that we were going there, because I did not expect that to be the case.
You also see them in that room at the beginning, and I love that they're human, because you kind of see them going at each other while he's getting ready to pick up that biggest honor of his career.
Well, and also they were so young too.
It's crazy how young they were, and it's like, even because actuarially he could have lived to see Obama sworn in.
That's right. We still haven't hit a centennial. It's amazing when you really kind of hits you as a younger person, when it hit me that that he's younger than my grandmother. My grandmother was 3 years older than him. How long he's been gone and how young he was. And of course, when you're a kid, that doesn't really register at all.
No.
39 as the total span of his life.
I want to call attention to the seeming record number of returning champions we have this week. Mm-hmm. So we don't call it out every single time we see one. So David Oyelowo.
Okay.
We're welcoming him back. He was in Lincoln. Stephen Root, who was in Trumbo. We just saw him in The Conspirator. He was in Seaburg. He also played J. Edgar Hoover in All the Way. So we have a returning character. We have a returning actor who can compare his performance in another movie with Dylan Baker's performance as J. Edgar Hoover. André Holland, who was in 42 and Shirley. Tom Wilkinson, who we just saw in The Conspirator. LaKeith Stansfield, Straight Outta Compton. Corey Reynolds, Straight Outta Compton. Coleman Domingo, Lincoln and 42. Alessandro Nivola, Coco Avant Chanel. Henry G. Sanders, put a pin in that. 42. Wendell Pierce was in Ray. Jeremy Strong was in Lincoln. Stephen James, who plays John Lewis here, played Jesse Owens in Race. And Martin Sheen we saw in Gandhi. So returning characters, we mentioned MLK and J. Edgar Hoover. We also see Malcolm X, LBJ, George Wallace. I don't even know if this was just complete. We got a whole Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy board of things happening here. And this is also, we were just talking about like MLK not being shown as his own character. He's always through someone else's lens. We have seen so many other people experiencing him but we haven't seen what goes on behind all of that. And that's really cool to see here.
And seeing him dealing with the burdens of how people look to him, towards him, too.
I dare say this is Ava DuVernay's Last Temptation of Christ. I'm going to throw that one, you know.
I was thinking that, too, and I was like, is that too far?
No.
But when you're seeing, like, someone who is a prophet portrayed as human, people think it is going to diminish them, and it's really the opposite.
Trying to say, no, he was a human being and show him as a human being and relationship to other human beings and the flaws of a human being. I'm probably jumping the gun here, but just the idea of presenting nonviolence as strategy and not just that he was a, you know, this beatific figure, which is what you learn. No, he was just such a, you know, good guy and such a Christian that he couldn't drink. No, it's an effective tool. It's a strategy. That's pretty, I think, revolutionary. And I think the film deserves a lot of credit for forcing people to rethink King and to take the halo off of him and to understand that there's a pragmatism to what he did and the moves that he made, which I don't think people always appreciate that, because it's much more gratifying to have, you know, to flock to the people who carried the rifles and were more confrontational. But no, I think that's a service was done by having that be part of the film.
He was human. He smoked, he drank. When he was in college and seminary and getting his doctorate, he liked to figure out who the tallest, handsomest guy on campus was and see if he could steal his girlfriend, and he usually succeeded. Jonathan Egg, again, goes into, he was like 5'7", and he has these little ears like Shrek, but personality, man.
And the voice. The voice is always, yeah, that goes a long way.
Yeah. He's the man has riz, like he just does. And I like so much too that David looks like him, but we didn't go to theatrical levels to make him look like him.
Suggests him, but it doesn't. It's not.
Yeah, like the way he carried himself and the way he played him felt very precise and true without them putting stuff on him. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated that as well.
Yes.
So yeah, you mentioned we open in Oslo, where he is about to get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, and he and Coretta are young and gorgeous and all dressed up, and he is not comfortable putting on that ascot.
No, and Carmen Ejogo, Jesus Christ. This is her second time playing Coretta Scott King. She played her in a TV movie called Boycott, which starred Jeffrey Wright as MLK. This is a wonderful opening. It is straight to camera, him putting this on and practicing his speech. I don't know. You read the book, Rena. I think he got this Nobel Prize the old-fashioned way, but let me know if I'm wrong and if he actually bullied more qualified recipients into giving it to him. Is that a thing that happened?
Shockingly, he did not have to invade Greenland to get a Nobel Peace Prize. He donated the money from the prize, although one thing he did keep, and he was like, he felt bad about having material anything. It took a heck of a lot for him to finally like break down, and like Coretta bought a house toward the end and he didn't want to have anything fancy in it. They had like plastic coverings on the furniture, but he did keep the gold Rolex that came with the prize. And his good friend Ralph Abernathy, who he knew that Abernathy felt like he was kind of in his shadows, and he bought Abernathy a gold Bulova. He got the Rolex, and he wore that every day for the rest of his life, from like what I read.
Coretta has two moments, one that happens here and one later, when she talks about how she can't give her children nice things, which alludes to that. But she also mentions the cost associated with this movement in just like one line. It was pointed, it was meaningful, but it wasn't harped upon. But this movement was fucking expensive. And reliant on a lot of generosity from all sorts of organizations and people like the great departed Harry Belafonte, who invested a lot of his own money in the civil rights movement. And we cut from the grandeur of this moment to The moments before the murder of Addie Mae Collins, Carol Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Rosamond Robertson in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham.
I remember the first time I saw it in the theaters and how what an impact it had. What it makes me think about is how I don't know that if Selma were made today, I'm not sure if that would play. I don't know that would be in the film, because we've come to a different place with these depictions of the actual violence and you know. Watching films with my son, who's now a cinephile, I'm frequently seeing scenes that I'm like, yeah, you couldn't do that today. And I think that Ava, and I feel the same thing about Barry Jenkins when he did Underground Railroad, because of us being where we are in the generational yardstick spectrum. I feel like we've sort of been part of this transition away from these kind of depictions of violence. But I think that as Gen X filmmakers, our instincts are to just show it and to say, hey, this is what happened and they had to deal with it, so you're going to deal with it in this film. And I feel like the millennials and now Gen Z filmmakers have just a very, very, very different relationship to that. What stood out to me is that this is Gen X filmmakers not pulling punches with this kind of violence. I don't know that if Ava were directing it in 2026 that she would do it that way. We just started becoming very unaccustomed to seeing this sort of traumatic violence rendered this way. And I wrote a huge, probably too long essay for Roger Ebert years ago for Black Writers Week about this subject, about sort of Black pain, capital B, capital P. It came up again for me watching Ava DuVernay's origin, starting with Trayvon Martin's murder. And to be honest, it just felt so out of step with where we are right now, like to show it, to see it. And so, yeah, I find that very interesting about my cohort of filmmakers who are kind of caught between the old way and the new way.
There's something very different about seeing it through her lens versus other lenses that we've seen this through. Mm-hmm. You know, there is an immediacy to the violence that happens in this movie that is harrowing and like very painful and visceral. And I think that is a credit to her filmmaking style and the way that she made this movie, that like the acts of violence in this movie are shocking and not lurid.
I don't think that a male filmmaker would get the notes about how girls that age talk to each other correct.
Yeah.
We see Oprah, and she is going through the very humiliating process of attempting to register to vote.
The questions they ask her, like, recite the preamble to the Constitution.
That
then
shit's all
how
real.
Many county judges, and then name them.
You can go on the internet and you can take one of the voter tests that they would administer in the southern states if you feel so inclined and see how well you do on it.
I'm sure I wouldn't get very far.
She doesn't pass because the test is impossible.
She doesn't know the names of all 67 judges.
In terms of stick in the landing with an opening of a film, we've just seen 3 scenes that set the stage for what this movie is about with such efficiency of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And she has laid the foundation for what we're dealing with here in terms of the threat, sort of the conflict in MLK, and what they are trying to get to. And then we cut to LBJ, played by the wonderful Tom Wilkinson. He's talking to Martin Luther King, and he's like, "What's the problem, Dr. King? Get on board already. We passed the laws. Everybody can vote now." God bless Martin Luther King for calmly explaining to him that passing the laws and saying that everything's fine as a white dude doesn't actually mean that that's the case. And I appreciate very much that LBJ, a man who clearly still had some racist trappings, cashed in all of his goodwill to move civil rights along. But he feels like we're done and dusted with this voting issue. And they're very much not. King explains that yes, that it passed, but because voter intimidation, impossible bullshit standards make the spirit of the law very easy to violate, because the letter of the law is not being enforced. And because they can't get the right to vote, they can't choose judges, they can't sit on juries. You can't do anything without the right to vote in terms of advancing any political causes in these southern states. And Black people are still deeply marginalized. I think they say like 2% have the right to vote.
I'm wondering how that 2% got through the test.
And LBJ is kind of like, okay, but he really doesn't want him to do this.
This led to a big problem for the film because of the controversy that this kicked up with many historians, especially LBJ experts, saying, crying foul that this was not an accurate representation of his commitment to civil rights. I went and looked up Douglas Brinkley, one of his on-camera interviews. I think it was for CNN. From 2014. I have to say, Brinkley keeps saying that it's a terrific film and that people should see it. I feel like back then it seemed more like an attack on the film altogether. I remember Ava being very defensive and just sort of like saying, well, I disagree with this sort of take. It's hard to say whether or not how much this muddied the film's name when it came to awards time. It's already a film directed by a Black woman, so that's already a hurdle for the Academy circa 2014, 2015. But this sort of became a thing almost reminiscent of the sort of Tempest in a Teapot around Zero Dark 30 that scotched Catherine Bigelow's almost. I mean, I thought she was going to do a repeat, win Best Director back to back after being the first woman to do it. And then this thing, it felt a little more coordinated in her case. And really, it's not even that much of it's such a minor issue. And obviously it's a little bit of dramatic license in there. Like it's a better scene if they're arguing than if they're like come in total agreement about things. It just feels like maybe at best it's just dramatic license. Again, people are very protective. And then, of course, the underlying thing is that, a Black woman is telling this story from King's eyes, and then all these old white guys are mad because it's not. So there it is.
LBJ is not bad. He is an antagonist. And I think that it's very clear in this film that he's dealing with competing interests. Like there was a lot to juggle with all of this and that it was complicated. But Martin Luther King, if we're watching a movie about his experience, he doesn't give a shit about that. He's on the front lines. He is seeing that people are getting murdered and hurt. And he is seeing that that nothing can drive LBJ to the level of action and response that is necessary in this situation until, spoiler alert for a movie that is based on history, a white man gets murdered. This is through Martin Luther King's lens. Like, why do we have to bend over backwards to accommodate people who are uncomfortable with seeing like a white hero hesitate and not do the right thing? Anyway, sorry, that's the rant. We're off to Selma. We are in a car filled with very attractive people. Coleman Domingo and a very brief sighting of Tessa Thompson here. And they have decided Selma is the staging ground for this.
Tessa Thompson playing Diane Nash, who was arguably more gorgeous than Tessa Thompson. Like, I'm not joking. Like, Diane Nash could have been an actress. It's good to see her here represented. I might have liked more. Sometimes the film feels very dude-centered, but, they're impressive dudes.
They go check into a hotel where Dr. King is immediately punched in the face by a white asshole. And they're like, yeah, this is the place. And then we cut back to LBJ's office where Dylan Baker is here to play J. Edgar Hoover. And this is like the first time I have ever been just downright delighted by the casting of J. Edgar, even with Stephen Root playing him, like no notes. Dylan Baker is the perfect, like slimy, icky person. And he is here to say like, we can make things very uncomfortable for him at home and really disrupt his marriage and ruin it. Also, who cheats on Carmen? I'm like, how? We see that she just like day in, day out gets threatening phone calls. I got a real sense of what a burden it must have been for Coretta and for Myrlie Evers and for Betty Shabazz and for every wife of these men in this movement, and what they like, just the idea of just day in, day out having your family threatened. And she has a beautiful scene later where she's talking about how difficult it is to cope with how close death is all the time. And MLK calls up Mahalia Jackson, which is something we'd all just love to be able to have done, but he has the privilege. And she sings him a beautiful hymn over the phone.
It's like the middle of the night to
inspire him. Yeah. Perfect voice.
That's one of those things that you hear when you're an African American studies major, that he did that he would have her call when he's down. I was just listening and thinking, as much as we love Malcolm X, the film by Spike Lee, my issues with the film, I think that Selma gets right what my issues with Malcolm X often are, which is that Spike Lee, obviously it was a heavy lift. It's a very different prospect thing that he had to deal with than telling an MLK story. And I totally get why he went for the kind of story he went for and focus on the big sweeping moments. But Selma is kind of what I wish Malcolm X had a little more of. That this is who's the human being and where's the pain and where's the price. You do get the little passing moments of Betty Shabazz picking up the phone, but I feel like Selma really focuses more on the toll that takes on human beings. So, and I commend the film. Selma's sort of like a child of Malcolm X in some ways, but also the scale, the fact that Selma is really just about a couple of months in a life and doesn't try to tell the entire 39 years of an extraordinary person, but one film paves the way for the other.
As we're getting on the road, like there's a lot of joy to be had here too.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's very important, that scene of King to humanize, and I can just feel the intention of Black people getting together and our interactions, Black men in their particular way of interacting. And yeah, it's an important little moment, that one of several, and I'll talk about some of the others later, that Ava includes. And it lets you know what kind of movie you're dealing with. And this isn't the usual hagiography of a great man.
And we see them, getting to Selma, and we see that the loggerheads that they are at with Snick, in terms of what should the movement be doing. And we meet Stephen James playing John Lewis, which we loved him so much in Race. So I was really excited to see him here. There are a lot of competing interests that you have to think about and consider, and approaches. How are we going to join our interests together? And they're talking about like what the police officers are like in this town. They're also talking about like, not unlike Malcolm X, in a very different way though. King understood theater. He understood the arena in which they were playing, and he understood how to work the media. So they walk to the courthouse as a group, and they stand in front, and then they kneel.
If I may, the use of the song, I Got the New World in My View, Sister Gertrude Morgan. I'm really tired of period films using anachronistic music, and I was again like, thank you, fellow Gen Xer, for like using something from period and that fits instead of some hip hop beat as this is happening. But yeah, very effective. And when I see things set in earlier decades using the wrong decade's music, it drives me nuts. But I think, again, that may be a Gen X thing.
I'm with you on that. And I loved that. And there's this shot here where they are standing in front of the courthouse in formation, and it's such a great shot. She's letting this settle with us, where we are seeing these people standing here not being violent, and they're about to like be attacked. And then the cops come through, and there is a man who is elderly, who is having a hard time sitting. And let's talk about the appearance of Henry G. Sanders in this movie. I didn't realize who he was until I was looking through the credits. I sent a crazy email yesterday morning where it was like,
it had a lot of
oh my God, Brandon, tell me it's not a coincidence that Henry G. Sanders was in Killer of Sheep and he's in this movie. And
And I replied, "It is not a coincidence." I don't think I knew it until when I saw the film, until the credits, because I don't know when's the last time I saw him in a film. It's been a long time. But in 2011, UCLA did its first ever retrospective of the LA Rebellion. For those that don't know, that is a movement that started at UCLA of African and African-American filmmakers who were making these really ambitious, stylistically and formally ambitious films mostly about everyday Black folks, and as a sort of corrective to Blaxploitation. Ava was there for just about all of it. And by the way, 2011 to be the first retrospective that UCLA does of that is pretty criminal. I've often said, I tell my students all the time that if the LA Rebellion were white, there would already be a statue of them outside of the film school, because very few film schools have a movement that came out of that school organically. So at that retrospective, Ava was there almost every night. And by then we knew each other from Twitter and things, and I would just say, "Hey, Ava, what's up?" And, she was finishing Middle of Nowhere, I think, at that time. Like, she was in post-production of it. And, we didn't talk much because she sat higher, and I like to sit right under the screen. But she was there the whole time. So no, there is no way that is an accident or a coincidence. She's always very much seen herself as a child of the LA Rebellion. She got Haile Garima's Ashes and Embers onto Netflix, which is a pretty big deal. It's a very even more sort of confrontational avant-garde film than most LA Rebellion films, and she's often done a lot to try to support the acting talent as well as the filmmakers. So yes, it's great to see him in this film.
So he is playing an elderly man named Cager Lee. And he's a very pivotal part of this story in a minute. But he is having a very difficult time sitting, and they're trying to help him to sit, and the cops are being real cool about the fact that he's an old man and starting to try and beat him into submission. And Oprah, who is playing a woman named Annie Lee Cooper, she has had quite enough of this, and she hits one of the cops with her purse in the back of his head. You feel the moment, the brief second of satisfaction, and then the oh fuck.
Yeah.
Of her doing that. And so everybody gets arrested.
This whole sequence is really effective. I mean, from the beginning, starting with King as if he's walking alone and sort of revealing that no, he's, leading this a large group of people, the angle where you've got the white folks gawking with sour faces. This is great filmmaking on Ava's part. And we also got a shout out Bradford Young, her cinematographer, educated at Howard University by Haile Garima, who has run the film program there, for a long, long time. The way that it's staged and shot and the sort of washed out color of Selma in the daytime, it's really effective. The shot of Oprah being sort of taken down with like the camera attached to her, a downright Scorsesean, I might say. She really rises to the occasions of the film to make this a visceral experience and not just feel like a sermon.
And we also hear and meet Governor and Human Trash Pile George Wallace has entered the picture. I'm going to talk about him for 10 seconds, and then we're not going to talk about him anymore because fuck him. But anyway, so he might not have been as racist as he played up that he was, and was only doing it to win votes and to keep people contented. And that's even worse than finding out that he's a true believer and he has blood on his hands either way. He's garbage. He's played very well in this movie by Tim Roth. He's there and he's like, okay, we got to deal with the black problem. And LBJ is seeing on the cover of his newspaper the visual of an upper middle-aged woman being slammed to the ground by piggy Confederacy jerk-offs, and is like, this isn't a good look. So that's what's happening with the white people in this movie at this point, while we see Dr. King in jail.
So we see King in jail talking to his dear friend Rolf Abernathy, and a note on what an exceptionally good friend Abernathy was. It would come as a shock to the many assholes who arrested Martin Luther King, but he actually hated going to jail. He dreaded it. It filled him with fear. That never really changed. He hated every time he had to go to jail. So his very good friend would make sure to get arrested with him if he could so that he could comfort him in jail.
That's a good friend.
Yeah.
So now we have a brief appearance of Malcolm X, who is coming to town to kind of do his own politicking move that is very canny, which is going to force a wedge to make himself feel scarier so that white people will be more inclined to align with Martin Luther King's approach. And we have this beautiful scene of him and Coretta talking. And they have such nice chemistry, the two of them. She goes to tell Martin about this in jail, and he's like, "You sound enamored."
He's deflecting his own guilt for his infidelity, and she knows it.
Uh-huh.
Now we welcome to the film Stephen Root, who is playing another human dumpster fire waste of flesh and organs and blood and oxygen named Al Lingo, who is going to be George Wallace's deputy. There's a march that goes on while MLK is out of town. It's at night, and the cops set upon it. And we meet Jimmy Lee Jackson. He is Cager Lee's grandson. He is also with his sister, and they are running from the police. They escape and dodge into a restaurant where they pretend to be eating, and the cops come and catch up with them and immediately begin beating all of them up. It's so fucking devastating. And LaKeith Stansfield is so good in this very small role. It's awful because you really viscerally experience the fear that this young man felt in the last moments of his life as he is unarmed and set upon at close range by cops who shoot him twice in the stomach, so close that they were pulling gunpowder out of his wound at the hospital. So first of all, it has unfortunate parallels to the world in which we continue to live. You feel the fear in a way that you are not removed from this and you are not looking away from it. MLK shows up to comfort Cager Lee, and he looks at him and he's like, he was a good boy.
That's the other scene that really stood out to me, because maybe Ava was just like, I'm going to make sure Henry G. Sanders gets his good scene. I was just struck because you don't often in these kind of films get a moment like that where you see the great leader being a consoler and being there to face the reality of the movement and what happens to people who join the movement. The first time we see Jimmy Lee Jackson, actually, he's reaching out to King just before King is struck, which I'm sure is dramatic license. It's a simple scene, but I remember thinking when I first saw it that, I feel like this is like a deleted scene in a lot of films. Like a lot of filmmakers would just say, okay, that's important, but let's move on with the main story. And I think it says a lot about Ava's, sensitivity that she left it there, and just to show King consoling, obviously knowing what King is just 3 years away from himself. And it's very powerful.
You don't hear a lot about him as a pastor, and there's that one scene between him and Coretta where they're like, if all this ends tomorrow, if we can throw this over to somewhere else. He talks about, I want to be a pastor someplace small and maybe take a speaking engagement here and there. But I feel like something he didn't get to do a heck of a lot of that's supposed to be in his job description is tending to the community.
Yeah. Yeah, and Henry Sanders in this scene is very effective. He has also so just a note on his shooter. It was a man named James Bonnard Fowler. He didn't face justice for a long ass time. Surprise, surprise. But he did face justice. A grand jury declined to indict Fowler in September of 1965, identifying him only by his surname to protect his privacy. Sounds familiar, but in 2005, Fowler admitted in an interview with the Anniston Star that did a newspaper that did a lot of work to try and get to the bottom of some of these cases that had gone unsolved. And he admitted that he shot Jackson, saying that it was in self-defense. He ended up moving to Thailand after he fought in the Vietnam War and starting a new life there. But I suspect he was always looking over his shoulder. And On May 10th, 2007, 42 years later, a newly elected DA for Perry County charged Fowler on first degree and second degree murder for Jackson's death. And he did surrender to authorities. He pled guilty and apologized publicly for killing Jackson and expressed remorse. Okay. Would have been cooler if you did it before you were, 42 years later, but nevertheless, and again said that he acted in self-defense against a man who was unarmed, of course. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail, and there was a feeling they tried to express that this was insufficient. And I want to be clear, this is not my justice, and it is not my justice to seek or be satisfied by, but I do find the justice of this man being chased by this act for his entire life, only to die with the shame of being convicted of this crime, very satisfying. But also, fuck everyone for not doing it in 1965. Anyway, so of course they're going to smear Dr. King now. LBJ has decided, it's time to unleash the J. Edgar on him because he is we're going to march from Selma to Montgomery to register to vote. And so he's like, Hoover, do your worst. And we cut to seeing Coretta hearing one of the recordings of him with another woman. And we have this scene where she is confronting him and he's like, it's not me. And she's all, try again.
She says, I know what you sound like.
This is agonizing. It's so intimate and so painful. He decides not to return immediately to Selma. He's going to take one day and spend it with his family. And he talks to the leadership and they're going to get things started without him. John Lewis decides to split from SNCC to go march. We get a setup here on the Pettus Bridge. And we are seeing a bunch of white spectators and police enthusiasts along with the police. So people who just want to support them actively.
Police fanboys.
Yeah, police fanboys lining up to back up the police and white people watching with their popcorn. Seeing this shot in a way where it is unvarnished battle is really fucking sickening.
Oh, yeah.
Unrelenting, but it's also really, really, really well done. In that it's not salacious violence. And we have the narration of the New York Times reporter dictating into the phone what is happening. We have CBS News on the scene covering this event unvarnished, live, and broadcasting it out. I was really sad because I was like, oh, these are victims who just want to get the right to vote. And they're being beaten by these awful people. That's the story. A lot of these people, they're still alive. Their children are still alive. Their grandchildren are still alive.
Oh, may their great-grandchildren spit on their graves.
I mean,
how do you live with yourself?
Back to the fact that I've written about the depictions of this kind of violence. I just think you have to show what this was. We do not respond to verbal accounts of acts of violence the way we do seeing it. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it brings up a lot of issues, but it's just reality. And we're seeing that right now in what's unfolding before us, that the murders that are taking place in front of cameras or at least the setup, there's some part of it on camera, just they're going to have a greater impact than not. And by the way, Ava DuVernay was not nominated for Best Director, which is really stunning. I think this bridge scene alone, if a white guy had directed the attack on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I don't see how they wouldn't be nominated for Best Director. The best directing nominees that year were Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, of course, who won for Birdman, Richard Linklater for Boyhood, Bennett Miller for Foxcatcher, Wes Anderson for Grand Budapest Hotel, and Morton Tilden for The Imitation Game. There's at least a couple of great filmmakers in there. Some of these have already kind of been forgotten. There's almost nothing that can match what she did in the scene. It's pretty staggering and absolutely nightmarish. I mean, that scene, having that girl in her Sunday best running out of the smoke, it's just such a haunting image, again, and being a girl and having a guy who's with the whip, on horseback. People now don't want to feel the feelings that come with that and don't think they need to. It's very impressive work having the CBS guy narrating it in real time. It's all very effective, and kudos to Ava. I think it's probably the most important thing she's directed.
That is how the news did it back then. You called your story in and someone took rapid dictation.
A little shout out here again to the heroism of John Lewis, because he was very badly beaten. I think he had a fractured skull, and he helped get everyone out of there and back to safety. And we see him doing that in this movie. And Stephen James is young and looks like the child that John Lewis was at that time. One thing that this does serve to do is that it starts to awaken the conscience of our country, certainly in our clergy. And we see some people, we see Black people, we see white people, including Jeremy Strong playing Reverend James Reeb, who we'll talk about in a second. And they are going to go join the movement and march alongside. They are realizing that the call is for more support, and they are going to try and march again. And they're standing there at the bridge, and the troops withdraw to let them go because they have, nice white people with them, and you can't hurt the white people. King kneels and he says, we're not doing this, and in praise. And here's the word of, like the message of, we can't do this if it means using these white people as human shields.
Which how you took it?
That was how I took it. That was how I took it, is that like the canniness and cynicism of the things that they were able to manipulate the media with only could go so far.
It also seems like they're not really prepared to march that day. Like when they eventually go to Montgomery, people brought tents.
This is not a popular decision on his part. There's a lot of debate about it. And shortly thereafter, we see James Reeb going out to dinner with another guy, and he is set upon, attacked, and murdered by 5 men. They were indicted in Dallas County for his murder, but they were acquitted after 90 minutes of deliberation by an all-white jury. There was one man who fled to Mississippi and was not returned for a trial. And then a 5th man named William Portwood confessed to kicking James Reeb in 2017 in an NPR series, but he was very old and addled with Alzheimer's at the time and died shortly thereafter. Fuck these people. It's sad but true. A white man getting murdered really turns things around and puts a face on this that is too difficult to ignore. At the same time, we have a court case going where they bring charges in front of a judge played by Martin Sheen, who's always good at portraying a proper ally. Most of the time, I think. I don't know his full. He's good when it counts in these things. And he's uncredited in this film. But they are in court to get the right to march, and he grants it. And then we also have a scene here where George Wallace and LBJ are meeting, and LBJ's like, come on. And George Wallace is like, well, what do you want me to do about it? You passed the law. I can't make anybody do anything about these voter roll things. And then finally, LBJ finds his nuts and tells him exactly where to get off.
There's this moment in here where LBJ tells Wallace, you've fought against poverty your whole life. You're going to go out on this thing. Wallace admits it's politicking. There is a Drive-By Truckers album called Southern Rock Opera and I recommended this album back in the Shirley episode, where one thing they keep bringing up is the duality of the Southern thing. And they talk about Ironically, in 1971, after a particularly racially charged campaign, Wallace began backpedaling and he opened up Alabama politics to minorities at a rate faster than most northern states or the federal government. Wallace spent most of the rest of his life trying to explain away his racist past, and in 1982, he won his last term in office with over 90% of the black vote. Such is the duality of the Southern thing. And George Wallace died back in 98, and he's in hell now. Not because he's a racist. His track record as a judge and his late life quest for redemption make a good argument for his being, at worst, no worse than most white men of his generation, North or South. Because of his blind ambition and his hunger for votes, he turned a blind eye to the suffering of Black America, and he became a pawn in the fight against civil rights cause. Fortunately for him, the devil is also a Southerner. It's a spoken word piece, but I feel like as reference on him, that's just as good as if I found one more thick book.
I'd rather him be a full-blooded racist than someone who knows better. That just makes it even all the more disgusting, because a lot of people died and a lot of people got hurt because he was politicking.
Yeah.
Fuck him.
That does give the scene between Wallace and Johnson, it gives it a certain, energy, that the idea that, yes, Martin Luther King is a strategist, and also so is George Wallace. And it'd be easier to just make him into this embodiment of the American id and white supremacy, but it makes it even more, and I'm sure Tim Roth was delighted to see that it gives him levels, and without completely making it like, some of my best friends are black, I'm just doing this for votes. But yeah, it puts him in this interesting place that is all kind of that King kind of mirrors, that they're both people that are very aware of the cameras and how their actions played it to those cameras. Yes.
People bombed a church because you said it was okay. You were okay with you were okay with it because it got you votes. Like, live with that.
There's a moment here where you see one of the suited G-men saying to King, I don't want to see this go wrong for you. I guess it's just that he shows that moment of, no, here's my stake outside of my job where I'm supposed to be impartial. I want this to work out.
And then the march does happen and it's successful, and this is a beautiful sequence.
Yeah.
But it's also not without its like poignant, ugly moments, because we do see, like, she does a wonderful job intermingling real footage from the march with the film, and you see that, like, there were white scumbags on the side of the road waiting to be mean to them. But also there were a lot of people, who were joyous, who joined in and completed this march. And it's extraordinary moment of accomplishment. We have this beautiful speech that Ava DuVernay wrote. It sounds like a Martin Luther King speech, but, and that it alludes to the fact that, like, there are forces that are trying to divide us and trying to make sure that white people never see us as equals, so that we will not join forces and recognize, like, our common goals. We're seeing this triumph, but you do feel like this is very unfinished. This is a bold ending to be putting an ellipsis on this story in the way that it feels, in the way the music feels, in what happened to the people afterwards. Like, because there is this white woman who shows up towards the end along with Jeremy Strong, and it is a woman named Viola Liuzzo. We find out that she was murdered by 3 Klansmen driving someone home from this march. So hours later, she was shot in her vehicle driving someone home. She was blamed for her role in her own death because she shouldn't have been there. Because there was a FBI informant in the car that had the Klansman who shot her, J. Edgar Hoover set about smearing this woman and saying that, they found, like, fresh track marks in her arm, and that she looked like she had been making out with the man who was in the car with her, who did not die but had to play dead because he was covered in her blood. Someone put pictures of her car in the paper with holes in it and was saying, like, this is a great party car. They mocked her death and everything. And those 3 men were eventually found guilty in federal court, but served 6 to 7 years. So, and I think that this is a really brave thing because we see that it's hard for like people like Spielberg can't put a question mark at the end of a movie. Like when you think about the ending of Lincoln, like he cannot do it. He cannot leave you with a sense of discomfort with what is happening and what you are seeing and how it continues. And as much as like Mitt Romney likes to quote tweet one convenient quote from Martin Luther King every Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King died a very unpopular man.
That's something everyone forgets, that he was quite unpopular at the time of his death. Although Romney's father was a lot better than a lot of other governors at the time. There are worse politicians who've misappropriated that quote.
Ted Cruz is going to quote, "We should all follow in the spirit of Martin Luther King" on Martin Luther King's birthday and misappropriate some quote.
Yes, he would have.
You do also see all of these people some of them went on to do amazing things.
It's an interesting device to do that because it's not a film that has used a lot of text. It's very sparing with the text. It could have introduced everyone with the typewriter, typewritten text on screen to make sure that we know who everyone is. I have a feeling that Viola Liuzzo's murder probably was the reason why she had to do it, because she wanted us to know that's who that was. Her centennial birthday would have been last year, I believe May, if I'm not mistaken, and James Reeves' centennial birthday will be the next January 1st. They were both a little bit older than King. These are young people. So yeah, it's an interesting note. I almost found it kind of like including King. It's a choice. It's like as if we don't know, but hey, this is America, and films are made for the rest of time, and so who's to say who's going to need that postscript one day? It's an interesting way to wrap up with the idea it doesn't end really. This is just about a specific battle that was victorious, but the war continues right up to right now.
I valued every scene in this where we saw him being just a real person and alive. And especially, I loved that scene at the beginning of him and Coretta where they're getting ready for the big night and they're just kind of like, at each other, just being a normal couple. I hope someday I get to see a movie where I don't know what the context is, but where you get that moment where Nichelle Nichols gets a message saying, there's a man here who says he's your biggest fan and wants to meet you. And she agrees to let this crazy fan see her, and it turns out it's Martin Luther King Jr., and he begs her not to leave Star Trek because it's the only show he can watch with his daughters. I would love to see that. I don't know what movie has an occasion to make that a scene, but I'd like to see that someday.
So, getting to awards talk, we've alluded to this. What's notable about this movie and its impact is it inspired, in part, a movement called Oscars So White. Because it was so snubbed at the Oscars, this was part of that. It wasn't the only one, but it was a critical one. And, you think about like the kind of saviors that the people making these decisions like to see. And this Dr. King was not that one. And certainly he wasn't getting enough help from white people in this movie.
Well, it didn't show MLK driving LBJ around.
Yeah, adding insult to injury, and you alluded to this when we were talking about the best directors, the 2015 Oscars was also like, I was looking through the list of the movies that got a lot of nominations. There's a lot of movies about white guys and white guy problems that were nominated for Oscars that year, like Birdman, Boyhood, which don't at me. No, I'm not interested.
I hate Birdman so much. I hate that movie with everything I have. And I've seen it, and yeah.
Oh, look, I'm One Long Tracking Shot. That's my movie. Yeah. And Boyhood, I'm like, who could possibly care? American Sniper. The Theory of Everything, which Stephen Hawking is a remarkable man, but that's white guy problems. And then Whiplash, Will This Boy Learn to Play the Drums Well Enough? Only we can find out if we watch the movie. Best documentary went to Citizen4 about Edward Snowden, which I can't fucking not. It's like Oscars, not only like Oscars So White, it was like Oscars So Well Actually guy. Like it is the mansplainiest Academy Awards. That's not true. I know that's not true. But it's like most of them are the mansplainiest Oscars.
That was, and I do want to shout out, was it April Reign, Reign? That was a Twitter user who coined Oscar So White on a tweet, and and I know she'd
change the world.
She'd want to be credited as such because yes, that was the time. We can almost forget what that was like when literally all 20 nominees in an Oscar year would be white. Because, black people in performing were just not that great with that kind of thing. So many of these films are just like forgotten now. The Imitation Game, I never saw it, but it's just instantly forgotten kind of film versus something that's really ambitious and trying to say something about this country that obviously we still didn't really want to hear.
And this is what I have for American Sniper and Clint Eastwood. Anyway.
Those were middle fingers. If you can't see us.
On this highly visual medium. Those were my middle fingers. But this was nominated for Best Picture. It won for Best Song. I did want to mention as a nice coda I mentioned Harry Belafonte up front. Harry Belafonte in 2015 won the Jean Hersholt Lifetime Achievement Award for his activism and was honored at the 2015 Academy Awards. It is well deserved. It's galling, especially because there's movies on that list of Best Picture nominees that I've seen that I was like, oh, that's right, I saw that. There are movies that we have watched on this podcast that I have forgotten that I've watched. I will not forget that I watched this movie. No. And I will not forget this conversation, and I will not forget the way that this movie made me feel and has continued to make me feel since watching it, and how closely it hit to the bone in this day and age in which we live, and how unsettling it was, but important it was. I think that she's just, I can't deal with how talented she is. It's not fair, God bless, and continue to do what she's doing because she is telling important stories. I'm in awe of what she accomplished here, and I want her to get everything. But also, I am envious. Did you have any choice dialogue, Rena?
Yes, I know you had choice dialogue, but honestly, the thing that'll stand out to me the most is that very, very long pause before he says no, and I suspect that he's saying that because he loves his family.
That's fair. I had a couple of things that just grabbed my attention. I loved when he was receiving his Nobel at the beginning and he was described as this undeterred hero for justice. I think that was a wonderful description of the man that he was and the human being that he was. I loved the line, what I have not gotten used to is this constant closeness of death. I thought that really drove home the immediacy of the fear that these women lived with every single day. And then also in his end speech, a line that I hope is true, which is no lie can live forever. I want to believe that that's true. And I certainly hope that it is.
I loved this film, but I was slightly less in love with it than you, and I don't know why. I can't articulate it. Maybe this was just more of a Sarah movie. I don't know.
It could have been. I think it's not a movie I'm like, I can't wait to watch that again.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I felt it in all of its forms on me. And again, we're in rough times. And I think it shook me a lot to see the commonalities, to see the things that haven't changed. It's kind of amazing because this movie it's packaged like a prestige biopic. And I think that she has added into it a lot of heft and a lot of elements that leave you shattered and asking questions that don't have answers. And I don't know how I would explain it to a kid. And it affected me very deeply.
Sarah, could you please give our listeners a quick refresher on how we score movies?
I'd be happy to. We rate movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to specific issues, particular to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
For outward appearances, makeup and hair, I gave it a 9. For acting and casting, 9.5. For passage of time, 6. I felt a little like there was one point where 3 weeks had passed and I was like, huh? For quality of the script, 8.5. For accuracy, 7, which is a high accuracy score coming from me. For storytelling, 7.5. Production value, 7.5. Production direction decision making, 9. Do we care? 9. And my overall average came to an 8.2.
Okay, I gotcha. All right, outward appearances, makeup and hair, 10. Acting, casting, 10. Passage of time, 8. Costuming by the great Ruth E. Carter, currently nominated for another Academy Award, which I think she's going to win, 10. Quality of script, 9. Accuracy, 9. Storytelling, 10. Production value, 9. Production directing, decision making, 10. And do we care, 10. And that's 95 and brings us to an average of 9.5.
Okay.
Right.
Sarah?
Okay. Outward appearances. I'm going to use my buy.
Okay.
Also, outward appearances, 9. Acting and casting, 10. Passage of time, 7. Costuming, 8. Quality of the script, 8. Accuracy, 7. Storytelling, 8. Production value, 9. Production direction decision making, 10. Do we care? 10. If I could go higher, I would. So my average came to 8.5. But that brings me up to a 9.5.
Part of why we don't talk about scores beforehand is so that we don't sway each other. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I was grading like a bitch eating crackers tonight, and I don't know why. But anyway, the average comes to 9.0667, rounded off. So congratulations, Selma. You earned second opinion.
It is now time for Second Opinion, an element we stole from How Did This Get Made?
The prize for scoring above an 8 or below a 4 is that you get to hear us make fun of IMDb reviewers who disagreed with our assessment of the film. I'm going to read this first one.
Okay.
1 star out of 10. Worst civil rights movie made. This has got to be the worst integrated theme movie about the African-American struggle. It is by far the driest, boring, long-paced, and unkempt script made about the Lutheran struggle.
Is that what we're calling it now?
The cast is a major issue as well, where they used actors who don't looked nor acted anything like MLK and President Johnson, not to mention the worst actress for Mrs. King's role. Those 5 men's narration clips about the cause on YouTube does better job for you, so refrain from watching this. And this was written by Addicts Pitts on December 11th, of 2021. So for a minute here, I thought that their problem was that they thought they had gone to see a movie about Martin Luther, the guy who nailed the theses to the wall, and that's why they thought that it was bad. But then I saw them mention people who were actually in the because they said Lutheran struggle, which I've never heard used to refer to this battle before.
Detect some anti-British bias here, because all 3 of the actors that he bashes are Brits playing Southerners. I think that's a connection.
It's not their fault that they're better than us at this. I don't know what to tell you.
Brits do some of the best Southern accents.
They really do.
A Brit doing a Southern accent, I think I'll take that over someone from Boston trying to do a Southern accent. Absolutely.
Okay.
They teach dialect at the British acting schools.
I would like to do this next review, this 1 star review.
Okay.
Here we go. Watch King starring Paul Winfield and Cicely Tyson instead. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of my heroes. If I was on that balcony, I would not have hesitated to have given up my life to save his. I want to make it clear my criticism is not of MLK Jr. or of the civil rights movement. I despise this film for being overly depressing and gloomy. Selma was so bad, I walked out. I couldn't stand it another second. It was like I was watching a horror movie. Oh, God. Call it what you will, but you are preaching to the choir. Do you really expect racists or the ignorant or those who don't care are going to race out to the movie to pay over $10 to watch Selma? I seriously doubt it. It's going to be liberals and others who are sympathetic to the civil rights movement that are going to watch this film. If this is your audience, then why club us over the head with horror and fear? Was that really necessary to tell a such powerful story? The answer is no. Watch King starring Paul Winfield and Cicely Tyson, and you decide. It's obvious you can tell a good story without sugarcoating it or traumatizing your audience. That is written by Interesting Fun Stuff on January 9th, 2015.
I have two immediate observations on this. The first is, what balcony? And the second is, remember when it only cost $10 to go to the movies?
I have a picture in my mind of the person who wrote this review, and he would have voted for Obama a third time. I'm just picturing the dad from Get Out. I'm just like this, like, I would give up my life for him. Cool.
Yes.
Cool, bro.
But don't make it depressing. What the hell?
Yeah.
Let's celebrate. This is for liberals. We're just gonna, have a good time and celebrate. Let's make a musical.
I know. It was like watching a horror movie. It was.
He's almost got it. He might have it. He might have figured it out. Like, let's give him the grace. Maybe he's out there right now. Interesting, fun stuff. If you're listening, let us know if you kind of get it now, because I think you might.
I'm going to go with this one. It's 2 out of 10. I really want to like this, but ... parentheses, yawn. Okay, for starters, I came into this with low expectations and they were met. The importance of what Martin Luther King Jr. did just does not necessarily make for riveting historical fiction. It can, and Mississippi Burning is a great example of that. Gene Hackman is the bomb in that film. This thing is boring like a metal pail and definitely not Mississippi Burning. The first time one takes a trip, it's wondrous. But here we all know where this train is going, and that's exactly where it does go. Spoiler alert, when the church explodes at the beginning, that took me out of my chair. After that, it's all downhill, sorry to say, folks. Banal acting and a lackluster script do not exactly make for riveting entertainment. Throw in lousy rap as a score and you get dog vomit. It redeems itself only slightly at the end as the lead does a decent MLK impersonation. Big whoop. I feel gypped at $1.50. Yawn. This person paid $1.50 to see this movie.
Shall I give Carol Black 32046 the final word tonight with their rather short review? And 3 stars out of 10. Disappointing. Written by Carol Black -32046 on October 12th of 2019. This movie is overly long with repetitive dialogue which delivers the same message, like a broken record. It missed the point it's trying so hard to make, and I became bored with it. It's got good actors in it, but even they couldn't save it. I think the story should and could be told in a much better way.
You know what's fun about all the Mississippi Burning shout-outs? That is a movie about white people.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly the movie Ava DuVernay did not want to make with this material, yes.
Important story, do not get me wrong, but that is a movie about white racists.
No, it is a textbook, well-meaning white liberal film that sidelines black people, and yes, it is just, even for 11 years ago, it's pretty astounding to have someone literally hold that up as much better film about the civil rights movement.
Other stuff that you should watch instead, obviously you should watch Selma. I also want to recommend the other film that I used as an excuse to recommend the album Southern Rock Opera by the Drive-By Truckers on. But yeah, also Shirley, and any Beyonce album where she lost Best Album to a white person, which is basically all the Beyonce albums, but especially every year on Valentine's Day, I like to listen to the song XO and think about how absolutely nothing that love has to offer in the real world is anywhere near as good as this song.
I will also recommend absolutely watch this movie. Also, two bookends on this would be Ava DuVernay's miniseries When They See Us on Netflix about the exonerated Central Park Five, and also 13th, her movie about the prison system in America and how it's just
that is a really good one. One thing instead of another. And also look up Harry Belafonte singing Turn the World Around with the Muppets. And also, while we're here, Jonathan Aig's biography of MLK that came out in 2023. Brandon, do you have anything?
It's Black History Month, why not? Night Catches Us is a 2010 film written and directed by Tanya Hamilton. Stars Anthony Mackie and Kerry Washington. It's 1976. Carter's running for president, and a man who was a member of the Black Panther Party but is thought to have been snitched returns to Philadelphia and his community, almost like a Western where he's coming back and there's a lot of people that don't want to see him. The film, it got some attention in 2010. It's a little bit forgotten, and I always take every opportunity to tell people to find Night Catches Us 2010. Another film that I think that takes a time that has been covered and really shows it to us from a really fresh perspective and very human perspective. Tanya Hamilton, I think she pretty much has made her the rest of her career in TV. I would love to see her get to do something else like this again. So Night Catches Us, check it out.
Before we get to attractions, apologies, and listener mailbag, I'd like to dedicate this episode to the memory of my first cousin once removed, Bill Light, who was my dad's first cousin, and he was a civil rights worker in Mississippi in the South in the 60s. He died of cancer in 2017. He was a remarkable man. And he knew Schwerner, Chaney, and Goodman, the three guys who were murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. His role there was in press relations. I remember there was one time in late 2016 I had turned up to volunteer for Hillary, and I met a woman who said that she had been a volunteer in Mississippi in 64, and I asked her, "Do you know my cousin Bill Light?" And she said, "Oh, I didn't meet him, but I heard of him. He was a very big deal." And I put that in my Facebook post from the day that still shows up, where he responded, "Well, I did try to have that effect on the ladies." But he has a snippet in the Eyes on the Prize documentary. It could have very easily been his night that night to not be at the station. And I'm sorry he's not still here. He was a really wonderful, wonderful man. He saw Janis Joplin live, and just wanted to remember him. He was a terrific man. I never got around to asking him if he ever met John Lewis.
Probably met a lot of cool people.
Yeah.
Do we have any retractions before we get to plugs?
Sarah, I fucked up big time today.
You did?
I did.
What did you do?
I misspelled Scorsese in a Blue Sky post. Sarah, how did I spell Scorsese, and how is it actually spelled?
I think it was Scorcese is how you spelled it, and it is Scorsese.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, Brandon, before we go, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
If you are so inclined, you can go to RogerEbert.com. I've got a few pieces that I'm quite proud of, particularly the very, very long essay I wrote about the ethics of depicting Black Pain in Film. It's a long read, but I think worth it. My last feature, Sepulveda, is on Vimeo. Vimeo, Brandon Wilson, Sepulveda. You look up Sepulveda, Brandon Wilson on Vimeo, you should find it. Watch it. It's a good watch. It's only 80 minutes, I promise.
We're going to link to that essay in our show notes. Couple of final notes before we check out tonight. Our podcast baby has matured into a toddler, and we have launched a Patreon simply in effort to defray some of the costs associated with bringing our show to you: platform hosting, recording, equipment, research. Occasionally we have to order a book off the internet. We also sometimes have to pay for movie rentals. And sometimes we may want to see a movie in theaters, or we may want to pay for transit so we can see each other in person and record that way, because that's often fun for us. We are offering shout outs and access to our awful first 3 episodes for anyone who chips in with us. What a deal. And with that, we'd love to thank Brandon, who is sitting here today. Thank you, Brandon. And Gates, who are both signed up. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you, Gates.
Well, yes. You're very welcome. Very happy to support.
And before we close out, I definitely, thank you for being such a wonderful supporter of the show and for participating and sharing your knowledge with us and being so fun to have on. Thank you. And thank you for participating in this episode with us. We're so grateful for your time and to have you here.
It's been lovely talking with you tonight.
Yeah.
Please
come back.
Thank you both. Of course. Thank you both very much. It's always a pleasure to talk with you guys. Thank you.
And just as a closeout, if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @BioPickAPodcastStory. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please also check out our webpage at biopickapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of our movies that we've done so far. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com. Our theme music is by Ben Patch. The intro is his song Slater Cannonball, and the outro is Spring Breakers, and you can check him out on Spotify. And as a reminder, as we mentioned up top, we will be speaking at Intelligent Speech Online, taking place on February 28th, 2026, and tickets are now available at intelligentspeechonline.com.
And you can enter Biopic, that's BIOPIC, at the checkout for 10% off. Tune in next week when we will be talking about Dolomite Is My Name.
I'm very excited to enter the world of blaxploitation with you, Rena.
Again, thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you.
Good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night. Good night, Rena. Good night, Brandon.
Sarah.
Thank you
Good night,
so much
Brandon.
for coming.
Good night.
Good night.